Thanks, Lisa. So for starters, I'll let me share screen, and then I'll get that full screened. Okay, so there's quite a lot of content to go through this morning, so I'm going to try and move through fairly quickly. As Lisa said, if you've got questions, anything you think I've missed, then please do let us know. If I can't answer them at the end of the session, then I'll certainly get back to you with an answer. So we know what we were talking about there. Lisa's covered the introduction, so thank you. So what is it actually we're going to go through? So we'll explore some of the more popular sales techniques and methodologies. In particular, we're going to look at the relationships between buying and selling processes. As every sales process or methodology, you won't be surprised to hear, has an equal and opposite purchasing or procurement process as well. So it's equally as important to understand that as it is to understand the sales technique as well. I don't know if anybody's ever done a Google search on sales techniques or sales processes, but if you do, and you put in sales techniques, you'll get over 1 billion hits back. That's a billion. I'm not going to attempt to cover a billion, so we'd better narrow it down a bit. I thought that was an interesting response that I got back. The 40 best sales techniques ever. You may be pleased to hear that I'm not going to cover all 40 of those either. What we will look at are a small number of the techniques that I see most of in the conversations I have with CEOs, sales leaders, and other executives throughout the business, and also perhaps ones that I've attended as well. I've been involved with selling for very many years now, but there are so many techniques there. It's probably important to say that following a technique or a methodology is better than nothing at all. So whatever I say, think to yourself, I'm not going to criticize or compliment any one more than the other. Any of them are better than doing nothing at all. So before we go into the techniques, let's just flip the coin over a little bit and let's look at a little bit about the process that buyers use and what influences them, because that has a huge bearing on the sales techniques that are appropriate to use. Over the past 10 years, I and my company have done an awful lot of what we call win-loss reviews. In other words, we've gone and spoken to buyers, procurement specialists, in other words, the people that make those decisions, and we've asked them in the context of a specific procurement they made, what influenced you? Why did you make that decision, whether you bought or you didn't? And when you open that conversation, they never come back with just one reason, one override. I say never, very rarely will they come back with one. It's usually a combination of factors. And over the years, we've combined all of those into some research. And what I'll do now is just give you the top 3 reasons for the decisions they make. So left-hand column, you'll see losses. In other words, when people did not buy something. On the right-hand column, when they did. And you'll notice the top reason for both purchasing or not is what we call value proposition. And that is the very simple thing about did the buyers, that's the buyers, did they understand the proposition that the sellers were putting to them? Did it meet their needs? And you'll see on both sides, it's the top reason for not, and it's actually relatively straightforward. On the losses side, the buyers simply said, the sellers just didn't get it. They didn't understand this, they didn't understand what we need, and they weren't able to articulate clearly why we would buy from them. They just didn't get it. On the flip side, the buyers said there were very credible links to our issues. We understood the benefits that we were going to get from that solution in both financial and business terms. So they were able to say the sellers clearly understood us. They put forward something that we believed would meet our needs, whatever they were. So that's the top reason, but there's a lot of reasons that go underneath that. On the loss side, you see relationships or lack thereof. What I mean by relationships isn't that the buyer and the seller have actually become friends. I had one CEO say to me in these actual words, "I don't want to be your friend." Actually said, "I don't want to be a friend of the sellers." Also said, "I'm not interested in their hospitality. What I want are people to bring ideas to me, challenge my thinking." Remember the word challenge. I will come back to that later. So that's really important. Relationships. The relationship part was these people don't make me feel valued. They're not bringing things to the party. That's why I didn't buy from them. On the win side, the common reasons were that the sellers were coming with a consultative approach. They were able to bring value to the table. And remember that word value, because we'll hit that one later. They also brought a business understanding, a solid knowledge of the client's industry, of the client's competitors, and also were able to articulate their vision for the future of that industry. So how does this actually happen? Well, of course, we understand that the world of selling has changed. It's changed a lot. So here we have, I think, some of our sales execs, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as they used to be, going around the country and meeting clients, prospective clients. Of course, what happens nowadays, certainly in the last 9 months, is that if the clients are actually in the office at all, the next thing they do is they run fairly quickly. The point of that, slightly humorous though it may be, is to say the world of selling has changed, not just in the way that the sales processes and techniques talk about as we go through, but actually it's changed because of the environment we're in at the moment. The big question, and one that I have no answer to right now, is this change permanent? Have we moved to a situation where buying will be a process that's done remotely, or at best over a Zoom link? Until March last year, I would spend some time in the US for both personal and business reasons. In the US, they do spend a lot more time selling remotely, simply because of the distances involved. Talking to one sales exec over there who closed a $5 million deal with the world's largest retailer, never visited them, never went to their head office. So they, for them, selling remotely is something they've been doing for a while. For us in the UK, maybe a little something that's different. However, the world was changing before then in buyers anyway. Gartner estimate that customers are already over half of the way down the purchase path before they consider engaging with you. It's not just Gartner that say that, though. There are a number of other organizations, procurement functions, that state that it's roughly between 45 and 60%. I think, they may well be right. Certainly, in my opinion, they know a lot more. But what's actually happening on the sales side? So let's just look at a typical buying cycle for a minute and relate it to sales, and then we'll move into the specific sales techniques. So having spent a lot of time with buyers, with procurement specialists, we found that you can break the procurement cycle down into a number of stages. It could be 5, it can be 3, it can be 7, it can be 10. You can talk to different people and they'll tell you it's a different number. For today and for our purpose, that's my purpose, my business's purpose, we talk about 5 different areas, if you like. So this is the buying cycle. So firstly, what we call discovery is what's your buyer doing in that process. Now, if you go back to the Gartner finding that they are already halfway through the process, you'll understand that the buyer at that point is probably aware they have an issue or a business opportunity. So something's happening that's going wrong, or they've got an opportunity to increase their business, to move into another field, whatever it is. The question would be, who made them aware? Is it something they've thought for themselves? Is it a market trend in their industry? Or has one of your competitors been there, spoken to them, and done a really good job to make them aware that there is an opportunity or an issue that needs some sort of resolution? They certainly don't have an answer now, but they might be motivated to do something. However, at this stage, the buyer isn't going to buy anything from you or anybody else. They're just in that discovery phase. In terms of going back to the second point there, who made them aware? Historically, and I'm talking probably 10, 15 years ago, the answer to that would almost certainly be that a supplier's come in and done a very good job. That is much less the case now, but hold that thought again. So if we move on to the next phase, which is research, having discovered that they have an issue or problem, opportunity that they want to solve, again, the buyer's now checking the market for who can solve their problem. So they're out there looking right now, and they could well be looking at your business and your competitors. They'll also be considering, can they do something themselves? Can they fix the problem themselves? And is it actually worth fixing the problem? They'll be looking at price and quality, and they will be checking out reputation and references. They'll be speaking to their friends and independent market experts. I think it's also important, because a lot of people forget this, that they might also be checking out your culture, your business's culture. They might well be looking at sites like Glassdoor, where employees, ex-employees of yours can rate you as a business, and which, whether rightly or wrongly, all come together as a picture of your business. Are you a business that they want to connect with, they want to do business with? The net of all this is that they probably know more about you at this point than you are likely to know about them. You may not even know these people are looking at now, but they'll know about you. And that's where they've got to, usually, in their process, before they contact you. That's if they contact you rather than it being the other way around. So thinking that through, we've now got to a point where there's going to be an initial contact, some way or other. And for reference, we use a framework, our framework, to look at the sales process, the sales techniques, and this is what it is. And it runs all the way from, on the left-hand side, from the tower orange, lead generation. So how you generate your leads, whether it's through marketing activities, whether it's through partners, whether it's online, whatever it is, all the way through to how do you manage the pipeline, how you qualify, through the process into why did you win or lose, and then feeding all of that back into the lead generation. So you target your business, and we overlay that with how you run your sales process. And it's the how you run your process that we'll focus on now, and it's how we unpick those sales techniques. Right up front, I said that there were over 1 billion hits when you put in sales techniques into Google. Fairly high on that list is a book that says here's the 40 best, and I'm not even going to do that. What I will do is cover probably the best known, or the ones that you may be aware of. If I don't cover one that you're aware of or that you use, it's one of your favorites, I apologize. I can't cover them all. There simply isn't the time to do it. And there are a number that, if you like, started a very long time ago. So the first one I ever heard, for instance, was Dale Carnegie. And in fact, Dale Carnegie may have been the first ever. I don't know. Certainly the first one that I did was something called TAC, which, although in existence today, isn't known as TAC, and the business doesn't really focus some more on sales techniques. So the point of saying that is that these are ever changing, they're developing. Some have stood the test of time better than others, and some are better suited to different types of sale. And by different types of sale, I mean that there are some that might well be suited for what I call strategic, large scale, large value, long-term sales opportunities. Others are more suited to the shorter term, tactical, smaller value, quick turnaround sales opportunities. So it's sometimes a little bit about understanding what your business is, what you sell, and where you fit into the big wide world of sales to select which is the right technique for your business and for your salespeople to follow. So having said that, the 5 that I will cover is, the first one will be Miller Hyman, strategic selling. Some people know it as the blue sheet or the gold sheet, which is an interesting one. We'll go into that. We'll look at solution selling. We'll look at an acronym, so SPIN, and there are an awful lot of sales techniques that follow an acronym, but SPIN is probably the best known one of that. We'll look at the Sandler sales technique, and then we'll spend a little bit of time on one of the words I used previously, the challenger sales technique. Well, what we'll do is take them one at a time. If I'm right in this, and Lisa, if I'm right, you don't have to say anything. If I'm wrong, please tell me, but we will make available to everybody a copy of the slides. I'm assuming that's correct still. Silence is golden, thank you. Let me just take a slurp of water. So, having looked at very briefly what's happening in the procurement side of the business, let's move on to Miller Hyman to start off with. I have to say, Miller Hyman's one of the sales techniques I've been trained in. I quite like it. But as with everything, it has its pros and cons. So the first thing is it does focus on the customer's buying process. It gets you to focus on that. My personal belief is that that's absolutely the right approach to take. And I will cover that off briefly as we move forward. And certainly in the summary that I give, I'll talk briefly about why I think that's very, very important. Having said that, the strategic selling and the blue sheet, gold sheet is probably best for large or complex sales opportunities, the long-term ones where we're not talking a 1 month turnaround or a 1 week turnaround. We're talking 3 months, 6 months, a year or more. Extended sales cycles. I've worked in scenarios where people will make a buying decision within literally a few days. I've also worked where I think the longest one we ran to was nearly 4 years, which was a government procurement. So extended sales cycles can mean many things to many different people. It's also really a very strong process for what I call the multiple influencers and decision makers, and that is where you have a procurement board or a number of people, each who has a specific function within the procurement process. So it might be somebody who evaluates it from a technical perspective. You might have somebody who evaluates it from a commercial perspective. You might have somebody who evaluates it from your client's perspective. And each of those people has a specific function. They influence the decision. They may not necessarily be the people who make the decision, those decision makers are at a higher level. They may be at the C-suite. And the Miller-Hyman method is very good at helping you as a business really get to the bottom of who are these people, what's the real role that they are playing within the whole of the procurement process, and how we get to understand who the real decision makers are and how we might influence them, how we make contact with them. Of course, all of those are fine and they work very, very well. As I said, it's one of the ones that I've done, and I do quite like Miller-Hyman as a methodology. It does have its, let's call them challenges to a little bit. Sometimes it can be what I call a little process heavy, maybe a little prescriptive, should we call it, particularly when you look at the blue sheets, gold sheets, and you just look through them as an initial glance. You think, well, it's very easy to think, whoa, there's just too much here. I'm going to be spending too much time doing paperwork and not enough time, out there meeting the client, understanding how the sales strategy is put together, working out the close plan. My personal view is it depends entirely on the type of sale that you're involved with. It works very well for those larger ones with the multiple influencers. It can actually be process heavy for the smaller, quicker turnaround sales. So it is very much swings and roundabouts. It does require comprehensive training. And having done the training for it, believe me, it is comprehensive. It's very good. It's very good, but it is not cheap. It really isn't. And it takes your salespeople away from the business for a time. My personal view, it depends how your business works, but it's a good investment. A little tip for you, I would check for what I call the automation into your, I'm going to call it a CRM system. I think most people understand what CRM systems are now, but check and see, can your CRM system contain some of the Miller-Hyman documents and processes. So you do need to be aware of that, particularly if you're quite prescriptive about the way you use CRM. And some people have said that the blue sheet is considered a bit of a straitjacket on them. I get that. I do understand that is a perspective for sure. I sometimes would counter that and say what it does do is give structure to the process. And if you go back to the procurement process, believe me when I tell you, they have a structure that they go through. And occasionally it's quite prescriptive on the selling organization. It will be almost dictated to you that says, this is the way we are buying. You will do this, 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 and this in these orders by these dates. And that actually requires you to have a similar type of structured approach, in which case the blue sheet might well work very well for you. So personal view, I think Miller-Hyman is good as long as the product or service that you sell is suited to that type of sales technique. So what we'll move on to now is solution selling. I do wonder whether this is the daddy of them all in many respects. Many of today's best known techniques can probably trace their roots back to this. And in that respect, the question might be, is it obsolete? Let me answer that one later, if I may, towards the end of this, because it's a really good question to ask. And actually preparing for this webinar today did make me sit there and think to myself, yeah, I wonder whether it is or it isn't. So let's step back to what the process or the procurement process is. And if you remember, we had the two things, which is trying to discover and do research about this, and that Gartner have found the average place where the procurement people are before they contact you is, over halfway through. What that might tell you is that procurement teams nowadays have access to a vast amount of information via things like, the search engines, Google, and any of the others. Of course, there are others. Also through benchmarking data, through consultants, through independent specialists that will, before a vendor ever gets involved, the buyers kind of established what their solution, ideal solution, is to the problem or issue that or opportunity that they have. So solution selling is based on the premise of the vendors understanding the client's business. So you'll see on the pro side, strong focus on the prospect pain. In other words, what's the issue? And they talk about pain on solution selling rather than opportunity. And you'll see that's one on the pro, one on the con side. The solution selling is a little bit more pain based. So in other words, it's more trying to solve a problem rather than create a business opportunity. And understanding that pain, the vendors would then put forward the solution to the problem. And of course, it would be based on their technology or their particular solution. They're not likely to recommend somebody else's. The issue with that nowadays, going back to what I was saying 2 or 3 minutes ago, is that there is so much data available now to the procurement specialists that in many cases, they have the solution pretty much mapped out in their own mind before they ever make contact with vendors. And that's what makes me think to myself, has this method been superseded? And the answer is not necessarily. The question might be, are any of the other methods better? Possibly. Has solution selling become obsolete? No, absolutely not. Again, if we go back to Gartner, it's saying 57%. Some say 45, some say 60. That does still leave, let's say, half of every sales opportunity where the buying people haven't decided what their solution needs to be. And for a lot of organizations, they're coming out to market to cure a problem, not an opportunity, but they've found some sort of pain. So solution selling with a strong focus on the prospect's pain is still valid. Having said that, it does work better in a complex multi-level sales opportunity. A strength is that the training, because solution selling has been around for a very long time, that the training is relatively cheap and plentiful, and it does have a really good track record. As I said, it's probably the original one that said, let's focus on the buyers and the challenges that they have. So as a result of doing that, it has built up a good track record, and people really understand that now. It's less effective on helping businesses develop opportunities. For many, it might be considered as overkill in the same way that Miller Hyman is. And I've put in FMCG as an example for that. And I've worked FMCG for many years, and solution selling was not something that was prevalent then or now, as far as I can see. Once again, I would check your automation tools and what the links are from any form of solution selling into your CRM system in particular. My net takeaway on solution selling is that I think it still has a place, although it might be limited. It's very focused on clients who've got real issues, and perhaps where through a qualification process you can establish that the procurement team haven't already narrowed down the supplier to one of just 2 or 3. I think it still has a place there, but it's perhaps not as strong as it used to be. So if we move on now to spin, good old spin. So spin was created God, blimey, back in the late 80s, I think, by Neil Rackham, who was formerly a founder, I think, and president of Huthwaite, who are another sales technique provider out there. It is an acronym: situation, problem, can't remember what the I is, and then needs. It's actually not a bad method. The strengths of it are it's actually relatively simple, and it's an inquiry-based method to explore prospects' needs and opportunities. In other words, asking questions. And that's always a good thing to do, although with every technique, when you ask the question, you need to step back and let the clients, prospects, answer and understand when silence can work. And generally speaking, sales people are not good with silence. It's just one of those things. We're in fact, I don't suppose it's limited to salespeople, is it? I think my wife finds silence offensive, although she's not in the room now to hear that. But it is a very good method as long as you understand what are the right questions to ask and what it is you're looking out for in the answers, and can really understand how those answers work to the solution that you have. In doing that, what you're doing is almost, if you do it correctly, you're having a conversation with your prospect. It becomes much less of a formal grilling. Here's 10 questions, answer them before I'll do anything for you. It becomes a conversation, and you start to work almost as a team, which I quite like. I think that's a very good way of working what I call the sales process, is to encourage the sellers and the buyers to be almost a joint team trying to solve a specific problem. It encourages your prospect to arrive at the same conclusion as you, so nicely aligned with you, particularly if you understand their business issues, perhaps as I'd love to say as well as them. That's never going to be the case, but if you really understand and can listen, then you'll come to the same conclusions, nicely aligned. I think it's good in lower value quick sales, although they will claim, Neil Rackham will claim, that it revolutionized high-end selling. I'm less believing of that, if I'm honest. I think some of the challenges on spin are that nowadays the clients expect you to have done your homework. They understand, in the same way that they've got access to a lot of data now, they know that you also have access to that data, and they expect you to come to the party knowing almost as much as they do. Therefore, the questions you ask, going back to it being an inquiry method, need to be very well targeted. If it's handled clumsily, then the whole spin technique becomes, it's not as sophisticated as many of the newer techniques. And if you're not careful, you miss many important follow-up questions that need to be asked based on the first answer you're giving. As a result, my personal view, I don't think it's the best for complex multi-level sales opportunities in the way that maybe Miller Hyman certainly is. There's limited automation out there. I'm not saying there isn't any, but I think it's limited. And I've kind of got a question I always ask myself at the end, is spin trying to be all things to all people? Now, given that it first came out in 1988, which is what, 33 years ago now, has it stood the test of time? Well, yes, to a certain extent. Is it still applicable? Yes, I think it is, in the right places. Is it the answer to all sales opportunities and processes? No, certainly not. I think it does try to be all things to all people, and probably that's, that is a challenge to a certain extent. But don't ever write that one off. If your business is focusing on certain things, then spin's as good as anything there is. Just have a quick look at the time. Okay, we're moving on. We're going to move on to two that I see quite a lot at the moment. The first one is the Sandler technique. This was actually developed way back, well before I got involved with selling, by David Sandler. There's a surprise. And the premise that they work on is trying to position the salesperson as a trusted advisor. And that is the perfect place to get to. It's absolutely where you need to be as a salesperson, is take the word sales out and become the prospect's trusted advisor. It does place much more emphasis on what I call the qualification stage, and I'll come back to the qualification stage in part of a sort of 10-minute summary, if that's okay. So placing the emphasis on the qualification stage is something that I absolutely believe to be the best thing that any sales organization can do, is focus on how you qualify opportunities and do it really well, so that you end up working on only the business opportunities you can win and that you want to win. There's no point in working on something that you can't win or don't want. It just takes up needless and pointless resource and time. So you might kind of gather that I do quite like Sandler, because it really does help you to understand really early on in the sales cycle whether you can win, how to win, and that's why I like it. I have this little thing about selling, and that is, if you're going to lose quickly, get out fast. There's no prize in selling for coming second. It's first or nothing. And if I'm not going to win, then quite frankly, I don't want to play. It's just wasting my time. So what it helps you to do, what it focuses on, is encouraging relationship building. Now, bear in mind what I said about the CEO that I spent some time with on a win-loss review, and be very cautious about how you build that relationship and what the relationship really means and what they want out of that relationship. As I said, don't necessarily want to be your friend, and the relationship means that as a buyer, I want you, the seller, to bring value to the table, to bring that value. So Sandler's technique does encourage that relationship building, which again works very well for me and the way that I like to see sales done. It does lay out a path as you go through the process, and it's almost a close plan, actually, which again is something, some people call close plan a deal capture plan. Close planning, deal capture plan, one and the same thing. It's just a path or a route from where you are now to how you're going to get the contract signed. And if anybody wants to know more about that another day, that's fine. I can try and help answer questions on that. But the Sandler process or technique does lay that out to a certain extent, not quite as well as I would like to see done, but it's a very, very good start. As I said, it does really help to qualify the prospect. It talks about pain and budgets and decision making. There's a bit more to qualification than that, but again, it's a pretty good start. And it does focus to an extent on providing options. Now, providing options in sales, and there are different sales strategies that you can use. I have narrowed it down and said there are 5 types. I won't go into them all today, but one of those is that if the client's looking for something and you can only provide a part of that something, in other words, it needs a multi-vendor approach, the Sandler methodology is actually quite good and helps you to become intuitive about understanding where you can play within that overall solution picture, and helping or encouraging you to focus on providing those other options. In other words, going back to where I started with this, it helps you to become the trusted advisor. It helps you to say, okay, we can provide this component of your overall solution. And for the other two components we need, I would recommend looking at one of these or one or two of these potential other vendors. And clients really like that. That's where you move from being a salesperson to a trusted advisor. There is, as you might expect with Sandler, the reason why you'd expect it, there's a global training network, and it's not cheap. It is quite good, and there are a number of good trainers out there who really understand it. On the flip side, as I said, some buyers are just not interested in any form of relationships, and that's generally procurement departments. The more enlightened will listen to suggestions and make amendments, but if a procurement department is actually involved by the time you get there, the chances are that the solution is almost in tablets of stone already, so be cautious of that. I think it doesn't perhaps give quite the value to the client as one or two of the others. In other words, it doesn't encourage you to think a little bit more about how you can help them, the client that is, secure more business opportunities. And I'm being a bit nitpicky with Sandler because I do quite like it, if I'm honest. And it's probably not best for short repeat sales cycles. So these are the very quick turnaround and repeat sales cycles. However, for me, the net of Sandler is I like it. I think it's a very good, despite it having been created back in the 1960s, I think, late 60s. It's well stood the test of time. And I think it's relevant, it's current, it's a good technique out there. And then we'll move on to the final technique I'm going to talk about. And that is the challenger sales model. I think to some extent that the challenger model, it relies on, or maybe believes that solution selling is dead. I could almost say that the challenger one is solution selling on steroids. I don't know. So the solution selling model worked on the premise that buyers didn't know how to solve their own problems. And that goes back to what Gartner is saying, that 57% of them do now because of the research. Solution selling worked on the premise and was around long before all that data was there. Challenger works on the basis that, again, you as a vendor are going to take to the buyers insight and value that they might otherwise have overlooked. And to an extent, that's why it's called the challenger model. You almost challenge their perception of the solution that they're thinking of. Now, that has to be done very, very carefully. And it can be viewed by prospects as rather challenging, and they don't like it if it's done clumsily. It does focus a lot on the client's value drivers. And by that, I mean, what's going to bring value to their business. Less on, tell me the technicalities of the solution. It's more on, what result am I going to get having done this, having bought this? What am I getting out of it? What value am I getting out of it? Which for me is the right approach. It is therefore easier to have what I call the budget discussions and try and not control the sale, but to have it in a nice structure that allows me as a vendor to be able to not dictate the pace necessarily, but to feel like I've got an element of control and it's not running me, I'm running it. Budget discussions are always difficult to have, and it's certainly a clumsy thing nowadays to go in and say, how much budget have you got? Because most buyers nowadays will say, none of your business, or they'll say, I haven't got any. And they may well be right. They may be having to take budget from other places. But simply going and saying, I want to know how much you've got, can you afford my solution? It is very, very clumsy. The Challenger methodology helps you to open that door to the discussions about budgets, and in many cases, by focusing on the client's value drivers, allows you to encourage the client to remove budget from other sources, and quite often to increase their budgets to meet the solution that you have. When this is done well, it generates trust, real trust. And going back to the Sandler process, it places you in that ideal box of being the trusted advisor. Having said that, it has to be done well. There is a lot of training out there. It isn't the cheapest in the world. It's not appropriate for every sales type or industry. It tends to be better focused on what I call technically driven solutions, and where the value is sometimes hidden a little bit. There's limited automation. Again, check that, because that will change on a regular basis, but check how that links into your own CRM systems. And there's very little process behind it or structure. Now, the Challenger advocates might disagree with that. That's my personal view, that it doesn't have quite the structure there that I believe helps us to move through the sales process and to understand where we're going. Now, there are a lot of other techniques out there. I'm just going to put onto the screen, a couple of others. Some of these are better known as what I call opportunity qualification. So for those who've been in selling quite a while, you'll understand the issue about taking every opportunity its own merit, and to work out very quickly whether it's worth pursuing or whether to just do a thanks or no thanks to it. And for a lot of people, they use one of the sort of 6 that you see across the top there. Interesting, you will see on the left-hand side, SPIN. A lot of people think SPIN is simply an opportunity qualification process. And it might be. You can see the acronym there. Implication was the I that I couldn't think of earlier on. SPIN will say that they're a sales technique in its own right. Likewise, if I move along to the one that's got MEDIC, and actually, in fact, the latest one there is MEDIC P, the advocates of MEDIC would say that's a sales technique in its own right. I tend to think of SPIN and MEDIC as more opportunity qualification rather than full sales process techniques. I think it's important not to get the two mixed up. Again, with opportunities, any of the opportunity qualification techniques across there are better than none. And if you took one of those and said, I'm actually going to run my process based on those, I would say, good, it's better than nothing at all. Having said that, I believe, and talking with buyers, there are 5 key things that you need to focus on as you go through the sales techniques and the sales processes. There are 5 skills or techniques that will help us move through the sales process, as you saw earlier, from opportunity identification all the way through to review. And what I'll do is just kind of pull those up as the ones that I think the process, whichever technique you choose to use, should help you with, should really focus on. The first of those is, as I mentioned before, how you qualify every opportunity. And that, as I mentioned before, to me, that's fundamental to any sales process, is only work on those that you can win and that you want to win and that you can get the right return on your investment. So really strong on qualification. The next one is relationships. How you develop the strategic relationships and how you move from maybe your initial point of contact through to the technical evaluators, through to third parties, TPIs, third-party intermediaries who may be advising your clients, all the way up to the C-suite who might be the decision makers. So really understand how you work the relationships and the relationship maps. The next one is value. Value is absolutely critical. If I go back to where I started here, which is what are the decision basis that buyers use, and if you remember, the top one for why they buy and why they don't is that they did not see the value that you were presenting, or they did. They either got it or they didn't. So really pulling together your sales strategy. How are you going to win this? And more importantly, what is the value proposition? If your clients understand that, you're in a much better place. So that's one of the key 5, that value. The next one is having, I call it a close plan. As I said before, you can call it a deal capture plan, but it's that map from where you are today to where you need to be. And think of it a bit like driving a car. If you start in Plymouth, how are you going to get to Aberdeen? Well, of course, nowadays you probably put on Google Maps or you put it on your sat nav in your car, which will give you exactly that. It will give you a route map from Plymouth to Aberdeen, telling you need to go via here, 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 and here. And that's exactly what a closed plan will do. It will tell you in a structured format how you get from where you are to where you want to be, what needs to happen. And ideally, when I say ideally, you will get your client, your prospect, to work with you on that because they have a plan as well. Remember, they have a procurement plan. And if the two of you work together seamlessly, you should arrive at the right place at the right time. And finally, understanding why you win or lose business and feeding that right back in at the start. Now, because I was limited for time today, rather than spend 5 minutes on each of those, what I've done and included in the slide deck are key takeaways for each of those 5 things that I spoke about briefly there. So you're welcome to that. That'll be something maybe you can refer to if you just think to yourself, well, what did John say? Well, there's a very shortened version of it. But more importantly, I suppose, to summarize for me, any of the sales techniques, any of them, need you to understand where you are in the customer buying cycle and what's required of you to help them achieve their goal. Number 2 is qualify every opportunity. Search for evidence. And do not be afraid to walk away. It's one of the most powerful tools you've got in your armory is actually walking away, and clients will respect you for it. Number 3 is use that close plan on every deal and focus on the buyer's milestones, not yours. So often we see people saying, well, we're through our CRM system has 6 gates that we have to go through, and we say we're through gate 4. Utterly irrelevant what gates you have. It's your buyer's milestones you need to understand and focus on those. Understand and focus what's important to your buyers. Develop that compelling value proposition. Learn from every result. Develop a continuous improvement philosophy. Can't stress that enough. Never assume that you know everything. There's always something more to learn. And finally, whichever technique you use, whichever process you use it on every opportunity. Don't let it slip. If it's good enough for one opportunity, it's good enough for all of them. And Lisa, that ends the session for now. I'm happy to take questions either now or at a later stage.
Thanks, John. A lot of information to get into that 1 hour there. I haven't got any questions on the chat facility, but if anybody wants to come off their mic and ask John now while he's here, then now's your chance. I think you covered a lot in there. as you mentioned earlier, yes, you can get the slides. I will send those out to you, but I do need those AG3 signed back to me before I can issue those out there. So that's not a problem. And John, I think you're happy, aren't you, if anyone wants to contact you if they've got any questions following on from here?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm very aware that there's an awful lot of information there. If we were in the good old days, I'd do this session in front of people and take 3 hours to do it.
Yeah.
So I've crammed an awful lot in, and I apologise, but at the same time, I make no apologies for cramming it in.
And we can get the recording will be up available as well some point next week once it's been edited there. I've just got a quick thing on the side there. Is it recommended to propose solutions that you don't provide as part of a package solution if you are to be considered as a trusted advisor?
Yes, I would certainly suggest that's a good idea, but of course, talk to the other vendors that you are suggesting that your client does. But that does really, that's a very powerful technique and does move you into that trusted advisor category.
Fabulous. Thanks, John, for giving your time up this morning. Much appreciated. We'll get those slides out to you, and the webinar will be up on if you've missed parts of it or you want to listen to it again, then it will be available to listen to as well on the YouTube or LinkedIn channel, I think. So thank you, everybody, for giving up your time this morning. It's my last one now till after Christmas. So Merry Christmas to you all. Keep safe. Hopefully you can celebrate as much as you can there, and we'll look forward to seeing you with our new webinar session sometime in the new year. So thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thanks,
Have a great
John.
day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.